We are living through a silent revolution, one not marked by banners or barricades, but by code, clouds, and invisible landlords. According to economist and former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis, capitalism, long the dominant economic system of the modern world, has died, not with a bang, but with a mutation. In its place has emerged something darker, subtler, and more pervasive: techno-feudalism. For centuries, capitalism operated on two essential pillars: markets and profit. Industrialists produced goods, hired labor, and competed in open markets. Wages drove consumption. Profits fueled innovation. But in the age of digital empires, Amazon, Google, Meta, and Alibaba, this logic is collapsing. The new masters of the economy do not produce goods themselves. They own cloud capital, vast, networked platforms that function like digital land. On these platforms, value is extracted not through production or innovation, but through rent. Sellers, content creators, and even everyday users generate wealth for these platforms, often unknowingly and without pay. We are not just users. We are cloud serfs, contributing data, attention, and creativity without remuneration. The result is an economy bloated with money, but starved of real investment and wages. Traditional capitalist feedback loops, labor, wages, consumption, growth, are breaking down. Meanwhile, big tech grows ever richer, not through enterprise, but by enclosing the digital commons. Varoufakis argues that this new system mirrors medieval feudalism more than modern capitalism. Yet unlike the past, this servitude is voluntary, seamless, even addictive. We carry our chains in our pockets. Techno-feudalism is not simply an economic shift, it's a transformation of power, freedom, and the very structure of society. This essay explores the core arguments of techno-feudalism: what it is, how it differs from capitalism, why Europe is falling behind, and what, if anything, can be done to reclaim democracy and dignity in the digital age. Part 1. From feudalism to capitalism to techno-feudalism. To understand techno-feudalism, we must begin by recalling the systems it claims to have supplanted: feudalism and capitalism. Feudalism was the dominant system in medieval Europe. It was based on land ownership and a rigid social hierarchy. Lords controlled vast estates, while peasants, or serfs, worked the land. Serfs were not paid wages. Instead, they gave a portion of their harvest, rent, to their lord in exchange for protection. With the Industrial Revolution, this model gave way to capitalism. The rise of machines, factories, and urbanization shifted economic power from landlords to capitalists, those who owned the means of industrial production. Land became just one of many commodities. The serf was replaced by the wage laborer. Now, people sold their labor in competitive markets and received wages. Capitalists, in turn, sought profit by investing in production and selling goods. This was a profound transformation. For the first time, economic relations were governed by markets and profits, not by tradition and fealty. Now, according to Yanis Varoufakis, we are witnessing another seismic shift, from capitalism to techno-feudalism. In this emerging order, the key to power is no longer land or even industrial capital, but cloud capital. Digital platforms, algorithms, data networks, and online ecosystems. Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Alibaba don't function like traditional companies. They don't primarily make things, they own the platforms on which others trade, create, and interact. These tech giants are not simply capitalists. They are digital landlords, charging rents to those who use their infrastructure. Take Amazon. It doesn't manufacture most of what it sells, yet it takes up to 40% in fees from third-party sellers. Or Facebook. Its users generate the content and data that make the platform valuable, yet the users are unpaid. This is rent extraction, not profit in the capitalist sense. There's no wage relationship, yet value is produced, without compensation. In traditional capitalism, workers were paid, and their wages contributed to consumer demand and economic circulation. But in techno-feudalism, millions perform unpaid labor daily by producing data, content, and reviews, feeding the algorithmic machinery of the cloud. As a result, we see a paradox. Money is everywhere, but real investment is scarce. Wage labor is eroded, and with it, the base of demand. Central banks are left printing money to maintain economic activity, but this only fuels instability and inequality. This transformation also challenges the idea of the autonomous individual. Work and leisure blur together. Even while we scroll, post, or navigate, we are working, creating value for tech platforms. The liberal subject of modernity, the free, rational individual, now exists inside a feedback loop designed by unseen algorithms. Our digital lives have been enclosed, just as medieval peasants were once enclosed off the commons. Thus, techno-feudalism is not just a new phase of capitalism. It is a new system entirely, marked by digital serfdom, platform monopolies, and a prophetic. Part 2. Cloud Capital and the Rise of Digital Rentierism. At the heart of techno-feudalism lies a new form of capital, cloud capital. Unlike traditional capital, factories, machines, or physical infrastructure, cloud capital consists of the digital platforms and algorithmic systems that organize vast swaths of economic and social life. It is intangible, yet immensely powerful, enabling its owners to dominate not by producing goods, but by owning the digital terrain on which others must operate. Consider Amazon, Google, or Apple. These companies have created closed ecosystems, digital fiefdoms, within which others must trade, create, or interact. Amazon does not produce most of what it sells, yet it extracts up to 40% in fees from merchants. Google monetizes searches, location data, and online behavior, none of which it creates directly. These platforms are not intermediaries. They are landlords in the cloud, charging rent for access. This shift from profit to rent is central to Varoufakis's thesis. Profit implies risk, innovation, and market competition. Rent, by contrast, comes from ownership and exclusion. In feudal times, lords collected rent because they controlled land. Today, big tech collects rent because it controls digital space and data flows. The logic of capitalism, profit-driven production and wage labor, is replaced by a system where value is extracted through control, surveillance, and dependency. Crucially, this new economy depends on unpaid labor. Every time we post on social media, leave a review, share our location, or train an algorithm with our clicks, we are working, generating data that fuels cloud capital. But unlike in capitalism, we receive no wage. Instead, we are the cloud serfs of the 21st century, voluntarily tied to platforms that own everything and owe us nothing. This has profound macroeconomic consequences. When labor is unpaid, aggregate demand weakens. If people aren't earning, they aren't spending. Central banks are forced to fill the gap with cheap credit and money creation, causing inflation, instability, and deep inequality. Meanwhile, investment in productive enterprise declines as more wealth is captured by rent-extracting platforms. Cloud capital, then, is not just a new business model, it is the foundation of a new economic regime. And like the land in medieval times, it is increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few, reshaping the balance of power in society and undermining the democratic foundations of capitalism itself. Part 3. Europe's Decline and the Geopolitics of Techno-Feudalism. One of the most alarming implications of techno-feudalism, as Varoufakis argues, is the geopolitical power shift it has triggered. The reason is simple. Europe lacks big tech. While the United States birthed giants like Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Meta, and China built its own digital titans, Alibaba, Tencent, Huawei, and Baidu, Europe has no comparable presence in the world of cloud capital. It neither owns the platforms nor controls the data. Instead, it is trapped between two digital empires, forced to use foreign infrastructures and abide by rules it did not create. Germany offers a telling example. Once a model of industrial excellence, its auto industry now finds itself lagging behind. Companies like Volkswagen can produce electric cars, but they cannot compete with Tesla, not because of engineering, but because Tesla's value lies not in its vehicles, but in its data ecosystem. Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter, now X, was not a vanity project. It was a strategic move to expand his control over digital infrastructure. Tesla's strength is its integration of cloud capital, software, surveillance, AI, and data-driven design, none of which German firms possess. This absence of cloud capital in Europe has major consequences. Without control over the platforms where economic life increasingly takes place, European nations become renters, not owners, users, not producers. Brexit debates, fiscal rules, and austerity politics have preoccupied Europe for years, while the real economic battlefield, the cloud, was lost without a fight. Moreover, Europe's traditional responses, regulation, competition law, and data protection, are insufficient. You cannot regulate your way into relevance if you don't own the platforms. And without digital sovereignty, you lose economic autonomy and strategic leverage. Europe has no equivalent to Silicon Valley or Shenzhen, not just as hubs of innovation, but as centers of capital formation in the cloud economy. Techno-feudalism also exposes the failure of Europe's social democracy to adapt. While it was once successful at regulating capitalism and redistributing profits, it is powerless against cloud rentiers who extract value invisibly and globally. Taxing them is difficult, controlling them is harder. Meanwhile, European workers and businesses are locked into dependencies on platforms they do not control. In this new world, power belongs to those who own the networks, the data, and the code. And unless Europe finds a way to build its own cloud capital or radically reshape ownership through democratic reforms, it risks remaining a digital vassal, stuck in an outdated model while new empires rise. Thus, techno-feudalism is not just an economic diagnosis, it is a geopolitical warning. The future will be shaped not by factories or financial centers, but Part 4. Rethinking Ownership and Democracy in the Age of Techno-Feudalism. In techno-feudalism has rendered traditional capitalism obsolete and eroded the foundations of democratic society, the urgent question becomes, what can be done? Yanis Varoufakis argues that tinkering around the edges, regulation, taxation, or ethical tech initiatives, is not enough. The problem is structural. To escape this digital serfdom, we must reimagine ownership itself. Central to Varoufakis's proposal is the idea of socializing cloud capital, not by nationalizing it in the hands of the state, but by democratizing its ownership. The people who generate the value, users, workers, creators, must own a stake in the platforms they sustain. This would mean treating participation in a digital ecosystem not merely as a consumer experience, but as a form of productive labor deserving of rights and dividends. One practical idea he offers is a reform of corporate law. Every employee would automatically receive a non-transferable share in the company they work for. These shares cannot be sold, traded, or leased, just like a vote in a political democracy. Every worker becomes a shareholder by default. This model would dissolve the separation between labor and capital. Workers become co-owners. Such a system has already shown promise in real-world experiments. Varoufakis references a tech firm in Washington state where 350 employees shared ownership in a company generating over $1 billion in annual revenue. Employees didn't vote on every minor decision, but had the right to participate and the trust to do so when it mattered. The result was not chaos, but a well-functioning, motivated workforce and a dynamic decision-making structure rooted in collective responsibility. This model of shareholder democracy could break the monopolistic power of cloud lords like Amazon or Meta. By spreading ownership, we undermine rentier logic. Users and workers would gain a voice in decisions about privacy, platform design, content policies, and profit distribution. Tech platforms would shift from being unaccountable empires to digital commons, still competitive, still innovative, but governed by those who sustain them. Varoufakis is clear. This is not a nostalgic return to old socialism or a naive libertarian fantasy. It is a radical yet feasible restructuring of digital capitalism, one that aligns with democratic values and economic sustainability. Unlike social democratic solutions that focus on redistribution after the fact, his vision addresses the source of inequality: who owns capital and who controls value creation. Of course, such a transformation would require immense political will, cultural change, and probably a crisis severe enough to force the question. In the end, the antidote to techno-feudalism is not regulation from above, but ownership from below. If we do not reclaim the digital infrastructure that now governs our lives, we will remain subjects, not citizens, in the new empire of the cloud. Part 5. The Death of the Liberal Individual and the Rise of Digital Dependency. Beyond economics and geopolitics, techno-feudalism has profound implications for identity, autonomy, and what it means to be human in the 21st century. One of the most striking consequences of Varoufakis's theory is the erosion of the liberal individual, the core subject of modernity, capitalism, and democracy. In classical liberal thought, the individual is free, rational, and self-determining. They work by choice, vote with intention, and play in the private realm of leisure. Capitalism, while exploitative, preserves the boundaries between work and life, labor and identity, private and public. Techno-feudalism blurs and eventually dissolves these distinctions. Today, our phones, social media accounts, search histories, and location data are all part of a massive system of value extraction. We are always producing, even when we believe we are at rest. Every action, liking a post, searching a restaurant, walking with GPS on, is transformed into data capital. The platforms collect it, analyze it, and sell predictive insights to advertisers, police, employers, and governments. In this regime, autonomy is illusion. Our desires are shaped, guided, and harvested in real time. This is not surveillance capitalism alone. It is a total enclosure of subjectivity. As Varoufakis notes, young people curate their digital selves with the awareness that future employers will review their online personas. What was once private exploration or playful identity formation is now a high-stakes performance. The self becomes a profile, constantly optimized for market acceptance. The lines between self-expression, labor, and branding vanish. And even worse, this labor is unpaid and unnoticed. Techno-feudalism thrives on the invisibility of exploitation. We do not see ourselves as workers, but as users. We believe we are playing when we are, in fact, working. This renders traditional labor politics impotent. How can unions form when workers don't know they are working? The collapse of the liberal individual also undermines the basis for democratic participation. If we are no longer autonomous agents, but manipulated data points in behavioral feedback loops, then political freedom itself becomes suspect. Electoral choices, civic action, and public discourse are shaped by algorithmic nudges and This explains the rise of mass anxiety, political alienation, and identity fragmentation in contemporary life. The sense of agency that once anchored modern citizenship is eroding. People feel they are living in a world they cannot influence, working for systems they do not understand, governed by codes they cannot read. Varoufakis does not present this as a dystopian future. It is our current reality. Yet by naming it techno-feudalism, he insists it is not destiny. Just as people once rejected feudalism and reimagined society under capitalism, we too can reassert control over our digital lives. But first, we must recognize the cost of convenience. The cloud has brought us closer to one another and to our own dependence. The question is whether we will remain digital serfs or awaken as digital citizens. Part 6. Beyond Techno-Feudalism. Imagining a Democratic Digital Future. If techno-feudalism has arrived, as Varoufakis argues, then we stand at a historical crossroads. Just as societies once rose up to break the chains of feudal land ownership and birth capitalism, we now face a similar challenge in confronting the power of cloud lords. The question is no longer whether we are being exploited by digital platforms. It is whether we have the imagination, will, and structure to forge an alternative. The first step is recognition, understanding that the digital realm is not neutral. Platforms are not just tools. They are territories, governed by rules we didn't write and economies we don't control. The convenience of using Amazon, the entertainment of TikTok, the connectivity of Google Maps, these are not free. We pay for them with data, time, attention, and behavioral predictability. These currencies enrich a handful of corporations that now rival or even surpass nation-states in power and influence. This new world demands a new political economy, one that goes beyond outdated binaries of capitalism versus socialism. Varoufakis calls for a system rooted in democratized ownership, not just redistribution. That means giving users, workers, and communities control over the platforms they depend on. Digital cooperatives, public interest platforms, and cloud commons must emerge as real alternatives to the private monopolies of today. Imagine a future in which social media platforms are not owned by Silicon Valley billionaires, but by the users themselves, governed through democratic protocols, transparent algorithms, and shared stakes. Imagine e-commerce platforms that return dividends to the creators, sellers, and buyers who generate the value. Imagine data not as something to be extracted, but as a collectively owned resource, managed by data unions that negotiate on behalf of citizens. These are not utopian fantasies, they are real proposals being tested in. Education must also evolve. Digital literacy should no longer mean just using apps or coding websites. It must include critical platform awareness, algorithmic transparency, and rights over one's digital identity. Just as workers in the industrial age had to learn how to unionize, we must learn how to organize in the age of the cloud. Equally important is the role of the state, not as a top-down controller, but as an enabler of digital democracy. Governments must stop outsourcing digital infrastructure to private monopolies. They should invest in public cloud infrastructure, support open-source ecosystems, and create legal frameworks for cooperative ownership. Public money should not build private empires. Ultimately, the struggle against techno-feudalism is not only about economic fairness, it's about freedom. The freedom to disconnect, the freedom to shape the platforms we live on, the freedom to be more than a data point in someone else's business model. The cloud may be vast, but it is not untouchable. Like the castles of old, it too can be challenged, not by storms, but by solidarity. If we dare to imagine a digital future rooted in justice, agency, and participation, then techno-feudalism will be remembered not as our fate, but as a phase we overcame. The age of techno-feudalism is not a science fiction scenario, it is our lived reality. Each time we scroll, click, share, or shop online, we contribute to the wealth of digital overlords who neither employ us nor answer to us. But it does not have to be this way. The first step is awareness. We must name the system for what it is, not capitalism rebranded, but a new form of feudal control in the digital sphere. Recognizing ourselves as cloud serfs is not disempowering, it is clarifying. It reveals the hidden labor we perform and the silent structures that shape our lives. The second step is education. Digital literacy must become civic literacy. We must learn not only how to use technology, but how to critique, challenge, and reshape it. Schools, universities, and community groups must foster conversations about data rights, platform governance, and collective ownership. Third, we must organize. New unions of data workers, cooperatives of platform users, and alliances of ethical technologists are already forming. Support them, join them, build more. Demand laws that protect your data, tax digital rents, and fund public digital infrastructure. Finally, imagine boldly. A better digital world is possible, one where we are citizens, not products, co-owners, not content providers, participants, not passive users. It will take courage, creativity, and cooperation, but so did every revolution worth remembering. Techno-feudalism will not end on its own, but if we act, consciously, collectively, and with vision, we can reclaim the digital commons, restore democratic power, and shape a future in which technology